Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is your weekly dose of the She Means Business Scotland show. Today, your host, as usual, is me, Finn Wycherley of Supersize Media. And we've got an amazing group of women based in Scotland or who are international business women on the show today for your delectation. And if you want to be asking any questions, it's a live experience. So make sure you hit the chat button. I know some of you are in the Zoom and some of you are hopefully watching us on live. And Karen Taylor has finally arrived, so that's great. But for your delectation today, we have Kat Lever, Director of Cross-Agency Initiative called Brand Scotland. She's going to be talking to us about how to make sure that Scotland continues to be strong and mighty, or small and mighty. We're going to be talking to Mary Turner Thomson, who's an international best-selling author, speaker, and motivational speaker, and author of The Bigamist, and also a world-famous lecturer on all things psychopathy, which is a word I'd never even heard of. But basically, to you and me, if you want to know anything about psychopaths, she's the woman as well. And then lastly, we have the wonderful Miss Karen Taylor, who's General Manager of Asia Pacific version of Anaqua, International IP Consultancy. IP to you and me means intellectual property. She has a massive portfolio of organizations and people to be able to handle out there, and flying the Scottish flag for us in Hong Kong. She's based out there and been experiencing lockdown long before we ever started here in the UK, in Scotland. And she's got a whole bunch of tips for us to how to handle the various stages of lockdown. Firstly, as a mom of 3, including 2 twins, and also as a business person. How are you handling the transitions? How are you handling the major pivots that are probably going to be likely to happen as we start to emerge from this lockdown period? So before we get started with our wonderful guest today, let me tell you a little bit about this whole show. First of all, I'm Finn Wycherley, as I was already saying. I run a wee Scottish digital agency called Supersize Media, and we specialize in helping organizations make sure that they're online effectively using all the tools and tricks and all the methodologies possible in the most efficient way. We specialize in small to medium-sized businesses and charities. So for example, one of the charities that we've been working with lately is an organization in charity in Edinburgh called Next Step Edinburgh, and they're looking at ways to make sure that everybody's aware of all the resources and supports available when you're trying to think about how to get a job or how to find new options for your career during the lockdown. So helping them to get up the courage to do some Facebook Lives and come up with some really strong strategies is kind of the speciality of what I do. But then the whole She Means Business Scotland show came about because of the fact that Facebook themselves work with me to be able to pass all the information to women across Scotland who need to know about how to use Facebook, how to use Instagram, how to use WhatsApp, and how to use Messenger. So this is an initiative between Facebook themselves and Enterprise Nation. Enterprise Nation is an organization based in England, but they've been making big strides into Scotland. They've got the Female Entrepreneurship Festival coming up, hopefully this year, but it might be postponed depending on what the lockdown re-emergence starts to look at. But that's a collaboration basically between Facebook and Enterprise, and they have a whole bunch of top trainers across the UK who are extremely experienced on using Facebook and Instagram, etc. And most of all of my colleague trainers, they all get places like Leeds or Huddersfield or Cardiff to look after. I get the whole of Scotland. And normally that would mean that we would be going around all the various locations around Scotland to do the road shows and bring in some inspirational speakers and then do some training as well to help everybody who's thinking about being in business or who's actually already in business looking to grow. and we have a fantastic time. But obviously, because of lockdown, we've brought it all online, and then every single week we've been having interviews with some top inspirational women who are based in Scotland or working in foreign countries with the Scottish flag. And every fourth week, we also have a social media training session. Today, we actually have the last of our interview sessions of the season. Because we're going to be coming out of lockdown, we decided we're just going to make this the kind of last of the interview sessions. Next week, we've got the final of the social media training sessions, which is going to be on how to create more engaging posts on Facebook, because as everybody should know now, just posting, dumping and running away on Facebook is never going to be a successful strategy. That's basically called Facebook publishing. It's not called Facebook marketing, because the marketing part is where you're helping people to understand that they need to take action and they need to kind of shift their perspective about who you are and what you do as an organization. So marketing is about making sure that that message goes right in front of the right people and you're making them take action. If your strategy is just about putting some content up, that's called publishing. Okay, so that's going to be next week for the final of the She Means Business Scotland first season. Okay, so a little bit of catch up with the news that's been going on lately before we speak to our amazing guests today. I'm a judge for a competition that's coming up that's been organized with Salesforce. Salesforce are looking to be able to hand out £5,000 in small business grants to organizations and companies. Just go to the Salesforce website and you'll see if you are eligible to apply for up to £5,000 in grants. This, by the way, is all about trying to help those companies who are being paid by dividends and things like that and shareholding. So a lot of companies that I know have been able to help their employees with furlough and all kinds of wage top-ups and things, but they themselves, because of the fact that they've been paid on dividends, haven't been able to access any of the support grants and opportunities. So this is a real good one for you if you're in that kind of space. Have a look at the Salesforce website and be good to me, because I'm a judge for the Scotland panel. Woohoo! Also, latest news is Scottish Government has released details today of its approach to easing the coronavirus lockdown. And they've got a very simple kind of 4-point plan about how they're going to be easing the restrictions and how we're going to be finally released into normal life, or normal, not normal as we know it potentially. And then there's also still time for anybody who's got some kind of beauty or wellness products or service. If they're wanting to have their products featured or sold through Next and Boots, what you need to be doing is going to the Enterprise Nation website and signing up for the exchange that's going to be happening, where you're going to be able to pitch to the buyers from Next and Boots and be able to get some feedback on what your pitch is like, or maybe even get taken up and having your products sold through Next and Boots. So get yourself to the Enterprise Nation website to have a look at the Beauty and Wellness Exchange. Okay. All right, so on that note, let me introduce our first guest today, the amazing Kat Lever, who is in charge of Brand Scotland. She is making sure that, you know, Scotland has been recognized as the top 5 most admired place brands in the world. And as director of Brand Scotland, she leads on the coordinated efforts of the international marketing strategy and talent, aiming to raise our global profile and influence perception. Kat, welcome to She Means Scotland. She Means Business Scotland.
Hi, thank you. What a lovely introduction.
And so where are you actually based right now? It looks very wet and windy.
It's proper leadery. I'm right in the heart of Glasgow, and it's, yeah, I was burnt 2 days ago, and today it's not pleasant.
And it's classic Scotland, you know. One day you're out there sunbathing taps off almost, and then the next day it's blowing a gale with blustering rain as well.
Absolutely. The plants are happy though.
So tell me, how's your job been like during lockdown? It's obviously everybody's been trying to adjust to this new online world. What's it been like for you managing a brand like Scotland from lockdown?
It's strange, isn't it? I think it's strange in every capacity. On one hand, I think it's really interesting how quickly we've sort of adjusted all of our habits to this new way of living. And then on the other side, you have days where everything just feels a bit insane and overwhelming. From a brand perspective and what we're doing with Scotland, we had to take a bit of a step back when the outbreak hit in Scotland. It wouldn't have been right for us to be still shouting about Scotland to the rest of the world at a time where everybody is going through something like this. So we temporarily redeployed most of our resource onto emergency communications within government and Visit Scotland and our enterprise agency, Scottish Enterprise, and just kind of pulled back and focused on the kind of life saving aspect of the public sector that we had to focus on. We are now planning to kind of manage the future recovery, so making sure that we continue to raise our profile internationally, because that is still important if we want to come out on a front foot at a time that's going to be even more competitive than normal. But yeah, really strange times all around.
Strange times. And so what's your feeling on that? How the brand is going to survive? Obviously, tourism is going to take quite a hit across the world. However, because of the fact that most of tourism that comes to Scotland tends to be from within the United Kingdom, perhaps we're actually going to see a tourism boost.
I think there will not be an industry that's not hit hard coming out of this globally. It's a really, really challenging time. And I feel for anybody who is an entrepreneur or has a business or is a creative, because there is no doubt this is very, very challenging for everybody. I guess it's a really overused quote, but as Churchill said, never let a good crisis go to waste. And there are some silver linings. And coming off the back of this, I think that what it's showing at the moment, and hopefully something that carries through, is that our kind of social conscience feels more acute, potentially. We've got this greater connection to community and to the planet. And I'd love to see that being part of what we build into our new future, rather than, I don't think reverting to normal is the right way for anything. I think building a better future where we focus on the fact that we are a small, relatively small, but very mighty nation, that if we come together, we can do really, really great things. So yeah, there's pros and cons to the current situation, but yeah, I feel for businesses and entrepreneurs and creatives. I think it's a massively challenging time.
Yeah. So what would you recommend that people should be thinking about who are working in the tourism and hospitality industry in terms of being able to make plans for the future? Because what I see around me is, I mean, everybody's kind of stuck for ideas of what the new normal is going to look like and how they should start preparing for it.
I think the only thing we can do right now is to continue to share and to reach out to other people and to come together and use that power of community and collaboration at every level. So both personally and professionally. I think that's the way that we will come out stronger, is using each other and sharing and learning and being open and transparent. And it's one of the things that actually I think gives Scotland a massively competitive advantage, really, because that's why I named this Small But Mighty. I think, we are a relatively small country, but that can be really, really powerful. A competitive advantage of being small is that we can come together more easily, we can be more agile, and we can come out of this with something new.
And I think obviously we have a sterling example of Nicola Sturgeon. She seems to be popular all over the world. And did she not have a feature on Vogue at one point?
She's done really, really well. I think, interestingly, a lot of the female business leaders around the world are coming out on top through this and another, but they're showing really great leadership. And a lot of it comes down to, I think, a clarity of communication and a willingness to be accountable for things that some others potentially are not showing. But yeah, no, I think she's coming out very, very well on all of this, as is the likes of Jacinda Ardern, who's just doing fantastically well.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what would you say that people of Scotland should be doing in order to make sure that we actually have how shall I say this? Make sure that the changes happen, because nobody wants to go back to the old normal. I mean, that seems to be the inference that I'm taking from what you're saying. The old normal, it was kind of crusty. It was, everybody's doing the right thing, but everybody's got a lot of aspirations of what they've seen around them and how things could be better. How can we start to make that happen as a community?
I think it's important that we really we reflect on this period at the lessons that we're learning. I think, coming into this, and obviously nobody could have predicted any of it, but we would never have thought that our entire country could work from home. And that's obviously, I know that's not everybody. There are some people in horrible situations, but to consider that you've turned businesses completely on their heads that would have said, there's no way we could do that. Or the enormous amount of creativity that we've seen come out of this period, and innovation and the agility that's kind of more prevalent and visible than ever before. I think if we can take learnings from, I suppose, not resting on our laurels and not using we've done it this way because we've always done it this way, or not letting kind of risk aversion being what holds us back, that would be a really positive outcome to this really horrendous situation. And that's how we come out of this stronger.
Brilliant. And so you've not always been the head of Brand Scotland. Tell us a little bit about how you've made that journey. Did you have an idea when you were young, when you were a teenager, that this was going to be a job of your dreams? Or would you never have imagined to get to this place?
Oh no, never imagined. It's funny. So you read a lot of leadership books, hear lots of people speak, and the thing that always made me worry that maybe I was never going to be a great leader is that everybody always had a very clear kind of trajectory in their head of where they were going to go. And I wasn't like that as a kid. I liked lots of different subjects. I was a bit arty. I liked languages. I liked English. I liked maths. I kind of went between subjects, never really knew, and was always quite jealous of people who had a very set career path and kind of conviction in their head. So I followed, subjects that I liked, and then I fell into, I suppose, marketing and language. That's why I ended up studying, because I originally was going to do law. I then realised, as I was kind of coming up to the choosing between the degrees I was accepted to go and do, that law wouldn't be for me, and I just didn't have the kind of passion for it. I ended up doing international business and language at university, and loved it. And then through a variety of jobs, I did some sort of traditional marketing, sales type roles, started to lose the shine on it a little bit. I thought, maybe this isn't what I want to do. I'm not feeling all that challenged, but it was in very traditional industry settings. And I then fell into a digital agency job, I applied for it. And when I started working in digital, that really changed. That was a game changer for me. Working with people with these really broad talents and skills that I didn't even understand, from like programming and development through to the design, through to the analytics. And I find that incredible because I love being challenged. I love learning new things. And so it was that really inspired me to kind of engage again with strategy and marketing and set me off on the journey that I'm on.
Amazing. And so what would you say to your 16-year-old self? What kind of advice would you give to your 16-year-old self? Because I'm sure that 16-year-old self is sitting in her teenage bedroom, stressing the hell out of what's going to come up ahead. If you were 16 years old now, what would you say to yourself?
Oh, it's a funny one. I think to sort of believe in yourself a little bit, and to not always. There's a great quote I heard. I was lucky enough to hear Michelle Obama speak when she came to Edinburgh. And she said that she used to sit around all these tables with, the most intelligent men in the world. And it was usually an older white man. And she used to sit around these tables and think, oh God, I don't understand what they're saying. I'm really stupid, and really doubt herself. And then one day it dawned on her, oh no, it's not that I don't understand it. It's that some of what they're saying is absolute rubbish and I know better. And there is, I think sometimes you doubt yourself and then you realize, actually, I don't need to. And you have to have a little bit more confidence and conviction in what you're doing. So I guess I would say to kind of believe in yourself a little bit more. And if I could tell them one day you'll have the best product to market in the world, your own country, then that'd be great.
Incredible, yeah. And so which other countries do you admire in terms of how they're marketing themselves?
Well, I mentioned Jacinda Ardern earlier. So New Zealand always does a fabulous job in terms of, from a kind of strategic and brand perspective, but also in terms of communications, kind of quite progressive policy making. Iceland do incredible work. A lot of the Scandinavian countries like Norway and Finland. So there's lots of fantastic work going on. And there's a really lovely community actually around place brand and place marketing.
And would you say that women are bringing something extra or special to the table, or do you think they're just as good as anybody else?
I think everybody brings something to the table. I think what do women bring that's different? Women and men are, physiologically we are different, and we do approach things in different ways, I think. But I do firmly believe that you need a mixture of everyone, so gender, race, religion, backgrounds. I think that kind of diversity of thought is actually what is the most valuable thing you can bring to something. So I think building very diverse and inclusive teams that challenge your ways of thinking, because if everybody was like me and they came from my background and they had the same experiences as me, then it would be a very boring experience and everything would come through a very particular lens. So I think diversity is more important than a specific gender.
Amazing, fantastic. And so what do you anticipate being the kind of biggest challenges coming up in the next 5 years for Scotland then?
Oh God, where do I start? Coming out of this is going to be challenging for all of us. What's the biggest challenges? Economically, we're all going to be massively challenged, but there's a little bit of a leveler in the sense that because this is a universal problem, everybody's going to be going through that. So again, it presents an opportunity of how do we create new, more sustainable, more inclusive, more responsible economies and businesses and models as we come out of this. There's, from a brand for Scotland perspective, the most challenging thing for a brand marketer anywhere, the most challenging thing is there's so much outside of your control. So I don't control what our decision makers say and do. I don't control our weather. I don't control how our sports teams or our celebrities perform, so all these affiliations that create perceptions of what a place is and what it stands for. They're outside of your control. So you have to work with this kind of brand expansion or extension strategy where you're focusing on what's the authentic values and things that we stand for and how do we build those up. And I think as we come out of this, one of the biggest challenges for us will to be build that confidence back internally in Scotland, to get Scotland's confidence, because it's always been something that we sort of struggle with. We're quite a humble, self-deprecating nation, and to get our business community to feel very confident and put their best foot forward, that's going to be challenging for everybody, but something that again we have to do collectively.
Absolutely. I mean, I always find that the Scottish people themselves are a great marketing tool, because I've spent a lot of time in France living there, and I remember in Saint-Etienne, whenever they knew that the English were coming to town for a football match, for example, everybody would lock up the shops and lock up their daughters and everything like that. But when they knew the Scots were coming, even though they pretty much had no chance to win, everybody was having a party and was celebrating because the Scots were in town. And I think that's the reception we generally tend to get all over the world, in boardrooms and in tea rooms and the like.
Yeah, no, I think we're really, really lucky in that sense that there is something quite inherent in Scots that people seem to trust, and maybe because we're quite humble and self-deprecating, so we need to get our confidence up yet retain that kind of humility. So it's a fine line to walk. But yeah, it's interesting actually. I was speaking to a chap in America yesterday who is very, very big in business, and he's worked around the world, all over the place. And he was saying the Scottish accent has come out in all the studies they've done as the most trusted accent in the world. Wow. And he's starting to see it in international airports, in bizarre places in the world. It'll be a Scottish voice on the tannoys, and that's a huge asset if you think about it, in terms of as a people to be trusted and to have that warmth. That's a massive asset that we can build upon.
That's huge. I'm gonna have to work on my Scottish accent. I kind of lost mine because I went and lived abroad for too long, and then I just got this weird accent which is half Scottish, half expat and everything.
Mine is similar. I always laugh, but I represent Scotland and I've got this kind of slightly nonsense accent.
Yeah, I call it the kind of Sheena Easton sound almost. Embarrassingly. Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so so we've got some comments from people. We've got Margaret saying she can't agree more with what you're saying. and it's very similar to the reception of Canadians that they receive internationally as well. And Karen's saying it's a Scottish accent in the Hong Kong airport too.
Oh, amazing. That's great to hear.
Brilliant. Okay, so where can people find out more or contact you or get to know you better?
I tend to be most active on LinkedIn or Twitter. So just type in my name on LinkedIn, it comes up, or Twitter, it's C_Lever.
Brilliant. All right, Kat Lever, thank you so much for coming and joining us and sharing your wisdom and dropping some knowledge bombs on the She Means Business Scotland show. Please stay around where we're going to be chatting with Mary and Karen. And if you want to jump in as well, obviously feel free to stay around.
Thanks very much.
Cheers, Kat. Okay, Mary, how are you doing? Unmute your mic and let's how we blather. As I start really emphasizing my Scottishness about me now.
I know, I'm Scottish through and through and I don't have an accent, so there you go.
Really? I thought you were English.
I know, I get that all the time. No, Scottish through and through, born and bred.
That's fantastic. One of my very, very posh Scottish friends, one of my kids said, "Oh, are you actually Scottish?" She says, "Yes, of course I am. I'm just posh Scottish."
Posh jock. Posh jock.
Posh jock. That'll do. So, Mary, you are an international bestseller and a massive expert on psychopaths.
Yeah, not my choice.
Yeah, exactly. It's through that diamond trajectory, you know, forged through the rocks of adversity, I'm sure. So tell us a little bit about your journey to becoming this international book writing superstar.
Well, in the year 2000, I was a business advisor for the Scottish Enterprise Network, and I was a marketing degree, putting it to good use, and I was married and I had 3 children, not particularly in that order. And then I discovered, I got a phone call from my husband's other wife, who informed me that not only was she been married to him for 10 years longer than I had, but she had 5 children to him, that the nanny had 2 children to him, that there was a child in America, that there was, we knew at the time of 10 children that he had by 5 different women. And then I kind of looked into it a little deeper and I discovered that he wasn't just a bigamist, he was a con man. He'd ripped me off for about £198,000, taken out credit cards in my name and left me £56,000 in debt with 3 small children to look after. They were 7, 4 and 1, my kids, at the time, 2006. Yeah, it was actually far worse. He's also a convicted paedophile. So, what I discovered was actually that he is a psychopath who actively impregnates women to rip them off for money. That he's been doing this had been doing it for 30 years. He's now been doing it for 40 something years. We now know of 14 children. The youngest was born on the 1st of August 2019 to a 19-year-old. In America. So the guy is still doing it and he's still practicing his art, as they say. Wow. So, but in 2006, we discovered it. He was given a 5-year prison sentence and got 5 years for what he did: bigamy, fraud, firearms, and not registering his address on the Sex Offenders Act because he was supposed to, because of his previous conviction. Whilst he was in jail, I went to a bookshop. I walked into a bookshop and said, this has happened to me and I want to read a book about it. And the bookseller stood there going, said, basically, it's not been done. So instead I walked into a publisher and I said, look, this has just happened to me and I'm going to write a book about it. And they grabbed it with both hands and said, absolutely. And it was, so the first publisher I went to, they took it on. I don't think they cared whether I could write or not. It was such an extraordinary story.
It can almost write itself.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, the great thing about true life and memoir and everything else is you know exactly what happened. You don't have to really think about it. You just write it. So that came out in 2007, and it became an international bestseller. It's been translated into Czechoslovakian, Swedish, Dutch, Polish, lots of issues. It went live on Kindle in America in 2011 under Random House and got to #1 in the Kindle charts in the USA.
Are you also talking about possible film rights or TV rights coming up as well?
That's in negotiation right now.
Right.
So yes, so got to keep that one under our hat. But yes, hopefully we'll have some news later this year about that one.
But what I think is incredible is the way that you're able to talk about it, just talk about it with such equanimity, really. And of course we've seen the children. You've been on television, on Good Morning, and you know, the children are able to talk about the whole experience and have that rational approach to the fact that their dad is a psychopath. That's quite a challenge.
I do think, I mean, one of the things that I sat and thought about when it all first happened is that we teach our children by example. And if we can sit there with a cigarette in our hand saying, don't smoke, kids, you know, they're going to smoke. It's obvious, you know, when you hold their hand and rush across the road, but then tell them to look both ways, they're going to copy what we do, not what we say. So we have to enact what we want our children to do. So I thought suddenly this is a golden opportunity to teach my children by example. This is a golden opportunity to show them what to do when disaster strikes. You know, would I advise them to lie down and cry myself into a puddle and just not do anything ever again and not trust anyone ever again? Or would I advise them to pick themselves up, dust themselves down, write a book about it and do something with it? You know, it's all very well, you know, it's like we get knocked backwards all the time. We get knocked backwards. But the point is, you know, use it like you're pulling the bowstring of an arrow, that you get knocked backwards, but it fires you further forward, further and farther than you could ever go before, you know. And you know, that's what I decided to try and teach them. And in writing the book, it was the most cathartic thing. I literally wrote myself out of crisis. I got up at 5 o'clock every morning and I would write for, bearing in mind I had a 7-year-old, a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. I quit work because I couldn't work at the time. And I started writing at 5 o'clock in the morning. I'd write for a couple of hours, get them up, get them to school and nursery, go to a cafe, write for another couple of hours, then pick my son up from nursery because I only had a free place for 2 hours a day. Play with him, pick the kids up, get them bathed, get them to bed at 7 o'clock, type up everything I'd done, go to bed and get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I literally just, it came out like, the best way to describe it is it's rather like if you've ever seen Harry Potter and Dumbledore's Pensieve, where he takes the thoughts out of his head. And it's like, when you are under stress and in a crisis, your thoughts are like a bunch of spaghetti, all tied up and knotted together. And you sort of start to think about one and it goes around and then loops onto another thought and then goes around and you can't make sense of anything that's happened to you. When you write it down, you have to follow the thought. So you're pulling that thought out of your head and then suddenly that whole bunch of trauma is loosened off. And now you can see the end of the next thought. And as you write it down, you're pulling that out of this. And it's like, finally, eventually it's all gone. When you talk about it, it's still there. When you write it down, you pull it out. So writing it down was the most cathartic thing. And I advise it for anybody who's going through any kind of trauma. Writing it down is amazing. Even if you never show it to anyone else, it's a fantastic thing to do to deal with any kind of issues or traumas.
Incredible. What an amazing approach. And so you're able to actually help people with being able to write through their trauma?
Yes. Well, we actually, when the pandemic hit, myself and 2 other authors thought, well, we're not nurses. We can't help. You know, what can we do? And so we actually started a 6-week free online course called The Book Whisperers. And it's, you know, anyone's welcome to join. It's just thebookwhisperers.com, bookwhisperers.com. It's a free 6-week course that we're doing. We've got a Facebook group. We've got 850 people joined us. They're sharing their writing online. We've actually produced a book which is being launched today, which is called Stir Crazy, which is of all the book whisperers, all the people, participants who have written things, you know, up to 500 words, poems, thoughts, ideas, stories, all about being in lockdown and all about being shut in, pictures as well, and just sharing it. And we published it and it's coming out today, and it's on Amazon available for people to order. And you know, so it's just an opportunity for those people that would like to have seen themselves in print but don't, you know, and so the people that are able to express themselves in writing rather than, you know, for their mental health and their creativity, and to have something positive come out of the lockdown experience. So, you know, that's been absolutely wonderful. And as I say, it launches today. So
that's so amazing. That's so uncanny. And then you're on the She Means Business Scotland show as well.
Absolutely, yes.
We've got some comments coming in. Michelle says, wow, so awful for you to have lived through, but great to see you turning into something positive which will help others.
Oh, yeah.
Martha says, love the proactive approach. And Kat says, an incredible outlook on a horrendously difficult situation. What an inspiration.
Yeah.
And
there was a lovely thing that somebody said once. They said, oh, at least there's a silver lining. You know, you've got the book out of this. And I'm going, you're missing the point. It's not silver lining. It's a solid gold cloud. You know, everything we do, you know, the mistakes we do, experience is what we get when we don't get what we want. And wisdom comes from experience. You know, I wouldn't be doing the things I do now. And I have a wonderful time. I travel. I do a live show with Jon Ronson, who wrote a book called The Psychopath Test because he met me. I mean, what an accolade is that? So Jon Ronson and I do a live show called The Psychopath Night. I get to do television shows. I get to travel. I get to do interviews like this. I get to do all sorts of things. And I wouldn't do that if I hadn't lived through what I lived through. You know, so it's not a silver lining. It's a solid gold cloud. And
also you do some comedy shows. I've seen you in action.
I have, yes. That was a bucket list thing. Stand-up comedy about psychopaths.
But don't you find that, you know, when you go through adversity, you almost, and you start to rise up through it, it's almost like a muscle that actually gets stronger and stronger and stronger. And by the time you're really forging ahead in life, you've forgotten that you used to be that wet, crying piece of rotten meat lying on the floor, almost forgotten by everybody in the world, and even especially yourself. And then you can't even remember who that person was almost.
Yeah, there is a lot to be said. I mean, when you lose everything, which is what I did, and I had to start over again, you know, sort of aged 40, I had lost everything. I mean, in year 2000, I had my home. I had a really good, valuable home. I had a great job. I had a car. I had, you know, sort of like I was married or whatever. But, you know, sort of like I was in a really solid position. And I was absolutely terrified of losing everything. Now I'm prepared to take risks and stuff like that because I know I've got a base, but I know that if I did lose everything, I'd be able to start over. I know I can do it, because I've lived through it. You know, my kids growing up, you know, they know I will give the shirt off my back to keep them safe, because I did. And they know as well, you know, they're pre-disastered. You know, when all their friends were going through school going, oh, drama, you know, and everything else, my kids are going, I lived through worse. So it sort of gave them that kind of boost of confidence that, yes, they could live through it as well. So, yeah.
Incredible. So what advice would you give to people who are kind of suffering? I mean, I know a lot of people are suffering right now because of the fact that, you know, their future is insecure, their current situation is in lockdown. Some people are terrified to actually leave the house. Yeah. What kind of tips and advice would you give to people who are...
Well, the main one I would say is write. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're a good writer, doesn't matter if you can tell a story, it doesn't matter if anybody reads it. You know, when you write things down, you're freeing it up in your head. As I say, think of it like Dumbledore's pensieve. You know, you don't have to share it with the world, but in actually articulating it in the written word, frees it up and from your head. It stops it being in that kind of knot in your head. And you'll know yourself when you're worrying about something, it just kind of goes round and round and round and round, and you never get a beginning, a middle, and an end. When you write something down, you have to give it a beginning, a middle, and an end, even if it's just a 2-paragraph thing. But always, you know, write journal. There is so many research projects done that have shown that writing a journal, writing a diary of your worries, ideas, thoughts, etc., that helps with mental health so much. And it staves off dementia. And it, you know, basically people who read and write live longer. Right? There's actually research, something saying that people that read live longer than other people, and it's like it makes logical sense because the people that read are experiencing what other people, you know. There's a lovely expression. What is it? People that read live 1,000 lives. People that don't live one. And it's those 1,000 lives that you're experiencing. You might be reading a book about somebody that notices a lump and goes to a doctor, and then, you know, you happen to notice the lump. You're going to live longer because you have more experience, because you've read other people's stories. It doesn't have to be true stories. It can be anything. But the people that read live longer, and the people that write, their mental health and their mental stability and, you know, into old age is much, much stronger. And just your general demeanor in life, the quality of life is so much better. So advice I would give is write any problems. As I say, you don't have to share it, but write it down. And it's like, There's something mentally strong about knowing that you have that story written somewhere and kept somewhere, because, you know, put it in a box, bury it in the garden, doesn't matter. But the fact is you don't have to store it in your head because you know it's there. So you don't have to keep remembering it. So, you know, it's just a fantastic way. It's cathartic, literally.
All right, so we've got a comment from Monica. She says, with the uncertainty in my professional life right now, listening to you actually made my day, Mary. Thank you. You really, really cheered me up.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Round of applause as well. So where can people find out more about you and even join the writing club and get their lives together if it's all a crazy mess right now?
Well, my professional website is maryturnerthompson.com. The Book Whisperers is just thebookwhisperers.com. Remember the S, because there's somebody else that's got the Book Whisperer. And it's like, you'll know you found it. It's a very colourful feather is the logo. I started a publishing company to help people who want to publish their own, a publishing consultancy, just to continue the writing analogies and stuff, which is called whitewaterpublishing.co.uk, if anyone's interested in doing their own publishing, but they can always get through with the ones. And the book, well, the book, as I say, is up there, but there you go, it's a copy of the book. So the book's called The Bigamist. It's out now. It's being republished in September by a new publisher, and the sequel is coming out in December called The Psychopath. So, and all very exciting stuff.
I have you to blame for stopping me from going out on those dating apps, because you told me the horrifying stats of the amount of psychopaths are out there in the common. Yeah. It's
like 1% of society is psychopaths. And that means 1% are out and out psychopaths, pure psychopaths. Up to 15%.
That's completely different from the narcissists as well.
Yes, so but up to 15% of people. But the thing is that not everyone online is a psychopath, but every psychopath is online. So you've got to be careful. You've got to be very, very careful. And it's just like it's tough though, because it's like people who are psychopathic appear very charming, and you feel an instant connection with them, you know, and as a result it ends up that you know anyone you fall for, you're gonna have exactly the same, even if they're genuine or not. So it's really hard to tell from just one meeting, etc. So
on that note, Mary Turner Thomson, thank you so much for joining us on the She Means Business Scotland show. Thank you very much. Do stay online, and we're going to be talking to Miss Karen Taylor next. Hey Karen, unmute your mic.
I've just unmuted myself, and I've got a big sticker on my laptop saying, look here.
That's it, exactly right.
I'm supposed to look at the dot and not at you ladies, which is really off-putting. I feel very rude, like I'm not making eye contact while having a conversation, you know?
You're fine. So tell us where you're at today.
So I'm hiding in my bedroom. It's 8:15 at night here. My two big kids are both at sleepovers with friends. And
that would be in Hong Kong, right?
Oh, in Hong Kong. Well, you mentioned that in the intro. Sorry, I'm in Hong Kong. Sorry. And so, yeah, the little guy's sleeping, and I sent hubby to the pub to make sure I had some
Yeah. Brilliant. So what's it like being an international businesswoman representing Scotland in the Far East then?
It's quite stressful, actually, to be honest. It's funny, when I was listening to what Kat was saying about, you know, where was your head at when you were 16? What did you dream about? What did you think about? And, you know, similarly, I had a lot of different interests, wanting to do a lot of different things. But the one thing that was always a thread for me was that I wanted to be an international businesswoman, whatever that meant. This was in the 80s, at the height of the shoulder pad nonsense. So I just had visions of, you know, getting on and off planes, being really glamorous. And also I always wanted to represent Scotland. So I really quite envy your job. And I hope I do my little bit here for Scots. I mean, Hong Kong and Scotland have a very, very long history. So half the streets here are called things like Elgin and Aberdeen.
And you've been able to live in lots of different countries all around the world, from America to Europe, and you've always been able to attend a Burns night everywhere you went.
I've done Burns nights everywhere. So I've never actually lived in America. I just used to go there a lot for work. But I did do a very famous Burns night in Belgium, which involved smuggling haggis all the way from Edinburgh to London to Frankfurt to Brussels, then up to Antwerp. And the only time I got busted was at German customs because I think the dogs smelled it. And I think they were a bit concerned because there were these two big round balls wrapped in tin foil. So you can imagine what that must have looked like when it went through a scanner. And I had to explain it was haggis, and they thought that was hilarious and let me go. I suspect nowadays it would probably be a much more vigorous reaction. But it was a good burnt supper. It was one of the best. But yeah, I've been to them in Tokyo, here in Hong Kong. It's lovely. And the one that I went to in Tokyo that was so nice is that the entire pipe band is made of extremely petite Japanese women. So even the bagpipe players, you know, the massive drum, it's all women mostly who actually play in the pipe bands. So that was really quite lovely to see.
Yeah, the Japanese are doing a fine job of creating all kinds of amazing whiskey as well.
Oh, they beat us at our own game now, yeah. Yeah, they took over back in, I'm trying to remember, it's when I lived there, 2006, I think, was the first year that Hibiki actually won the global gold medal. And I think they win most years now, actually. So like most things, the Japanese have perfected somebody else's, you know, invention. But it's actually a really beautiful story because it was a Japanese man in the 1800s who went to the Scottish Highlands because he liked the music. And he met someone who ran a tiny little distillery and wooed the daughter, married the daughter. And so the dad gave him the recipe and he took that back to Japan. And the water is actually perfect. That's partly why the Japanese whiskies are so nice. And so they set that distillery up together. And after he passed away, she ran the business. And that company is now Sapporo. So all the Sapporo beers, etc. That originally was founded by a Scottish woman and a Japanese husband.
Incredible. So what's it been like then? Tell us, being in Hong Kong during lockdown, because obviously you got into lockdown a lot earlier than
we did.
And then you're already coming out of it much earlier. What have been the various stages that you've gone through that you've noticed?
So I mean, one thing in Hong Kong is we've never actually had a full lockdown in the way that people have experienced in places like Scotland or Europe or America. So we've never actually had a stage where we were told, stay in your house, you can't leave your house. You can only come out once a day for groceries. We've never actually been in that position. So what happened was kind of towards the end of January, you know, the word was already out about what was happening in Wuhan. And obviously in Hong Kong, I mean, similarly to Scotland, we only have about 7.5 million people and a much larger neighbour, lots of cross-border traffic, tourism, etc. Tens of millions of people come to Hong Kong all the time for holidays. So it's normally incredibly busy, full hotels, full shops, etc. Once people heard what was happening, firstly, the place was empty because those tourists didn't come because of what was already happening in mainland China. And then secondly, a lot of Hong Kong people just self-isolated anyway. So because of their experience with SARS previously, everybody immediately started wearing masks, sanitizing everything, staying home. The kids were actually already on school holidays because of Chinese New Year. So a lot of families who'd gone abroad just stayed where they were. So friends who, for example, went back to Taiwan to see grandparents or went back to New Zealand, everyone just stayed and no one came back. So that was quite quiet anyway. And then the government decided after Chinese New Year for the kids not to come back to school. So the school closure was also very early compared to what we've seen in a lot of other places. And I think that made a huge difference. Then they said, okay, we encourage everybody to work from home. Again, it was never mandated. So, you know, some people still went into the office, just depended. But civil servants, for example, were all told to stay at home. But for everyone else, it was pretty flexible. Cafes, restaurants, bars, gyms, swimming pools, salons, everything was still open. And that actually only changed in late March, because what happened was a lot of people started coming back from Europe and America and other places, by which time they had quite substantial outbreaks. And so it was actually imported cases into Hong Kong. And that's when they started bringing in quarantine. And then people were breaching quarantine. And that's when they then finally closed bars and live music venues, karaoke places, anywhere, gyms that had been a bit of a hot spot.
And now you're all spread. The emergence phase. People are coming out of that, aren't they?
Yeah, so that sort of informally started to end by the Easter holidays. You know, the weather changed, it was really hot. I think a lot of people were really quite fed up by then. And so even though there are still restrictions on large gatherings, you know, the hiking trails were packed, the beaches were packed, everybody was coming back to normal. There are still restrictions on restaurants about spacing between tables, and you get your temperature taken, you have to use hand sanitizer when you arrive. But even there's a lot of places are kind of really busy now. And there was a bit of a controversy because there is a part of town which is just lined with bars, and then everyone hangs out on the street, and that was absolutely packed. And the police went past in a police van with a little tannoy saying, "You are breaking the law, please move." And it was quite funny. I wish I'd filmed it, but the van couldn't actually get through. There's so many people. They're all just standing around having a beer. It's like, yeah, whatever. And the police are trying to push through with their little tannoy announcement. So, I mean, the restrictions are still there, but they're not really being enforced very much. And Monday this week, kids are back to school. So the great return begins.
And you've been quoted in the Sunday Times talking about the kind of emotional transition that people...
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. So I kind of wrote down my thoughts. So a bit like what Mary was saying about write it down. And I found there was a period around sort of February, March where I was quite overwhelmed with lots of friends and relatives all over the world. I mean, it's the upside downside of having been so many places, all asking me the same questions and going through these kind of emotional roller coasters and kind of trying to help them with it, as well as obviously managing my own situation and my team, because my team is primarily in Japan, which has been more severely affected. So, you know, I was kind of trying to balance all this stuff. And I sat down and kind of ordered my thoughts of what I'd been through and what I'd experienced, what I'd seen around me. And so the 5 kind of main phases that I kind of thought about were the frenzy. So that initial stage when it's just happening and everyone's sharing information and where can you buy toilet roll and what do you think is going to happen? There's a lot of speculation, preparation, but there's a certain degree of excitement in that. You know, it's new.
I know.
It's like the most exciting thing that's happened in ages. But that then is usually followed by the slump. So when that initial novelty value wears off. Yeah, sorry.
Meeting you in Bali and was it end of January, beginning of February? You were
early Feb.
A huge giant bag of toilet paper. I thought
that's right. That's right. I had international loo roll supply because I'd just been on a business trip in Japan. I'd packed a whole suitcase of toilet roll, sanitizer, and masks from Japan because at that point they didn't really have an issue and there were no shortages. Then you brought loo roll from Scotland, from my mum, which by the way was the best quality loo roll out of all of them, I have to say. And then I bought some in Bali as well. But the great loo roll crisis of February 2020 is long over. And we do have plenty toilet roll in Hong Kong now. But I mean, in a way, that's been one of the interesting ironies is I had friends and relatives, particularly from the States, shipping me masks. I'm now shipping them back. You know, so all this stuff is just circulating the globe as it's moved around. And in a way, the emotional support is similar. We're all at different stages at different times. And so being able to help each other through that is critical. And I mean, once you go through your slump, I definitely had a gigantic slump and I was not happy bunny. Everyone in the UK was going through the frenzy. So it was full of like, let's do Joe Wicks videos and let's learn Spanish while we're like, I'm like, who are these people? I can barely get out of bed, you know? Is there something wrong with me? I'm a terrible person. I should be like taking up a hobby or something. And I think that's one of the key things is as you're helping both yourself and others, think about what phase you're in, what phase they're in. If you're in a little hyper bunny phase, telling someone who's in the slump that they should take up, you know, meditation isn't helpful. It's actually not helpful. It's quite annoying. You know, I mean, if one more person told me to start doing yoga meditation, I might have bumped them. That's it, obviously. But then what happens, obviously, as it does in all of these things, is you adjust, right? You adjust. I mean, our kids have now been homeschooling for months. They've got their online classes. They're in their routine. You kind of get a new routine and everyone gets kind of comfortable and used to that. Now they're about to go back to school. Husband's already back to the office. Everyone's a little bit weirded out because it's kind of you're going back out there, and also school is not normal. I mean, they're socially distancing, they can't hug their friends, there's no playtime, they're only going in one day and one day off, then they'll do online homeschooling the days in between, so it's still a bit wonky, right? It's better than nothing and it's a transition, but I think it's really important that we think about that emergence phase as a transition, as a process, and one that will also be emotional in its own way. There will be certain things that we miss. You know, like my daughter said to me the other day, I really miss having family dinner every night, Mummy, because that's normally really hard for us because of commutes and things like that. When we were all home working, we could all sit down together at 5:30, 6 o'clock and have dinner. So there's all these kind of things that have become like little new rituals that you have to say goodbye to, or, you know, appreciate and talk about that. So I think the emergence will be more emotional than people give it credit for. I think everyone thinks we're all just going to run out screaming, excited, and, you know, just happy to be back out there. But I think there's a lot that we might miss too.
Amazing. So Karen, we've only got a couple of minutes left now.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
So I want to just tap your brain into what you're thinking businesses should be thinking about as they're adjusting to the new normal. I know you've got a lot of ideas there. We're definitely going to be able to cover.
I'm going to give you 3.
Yeah, but
very quickly.
Well, we can put them all in the post below the video when we post the video into the Facebook group as well, so that people can use more about it. So go ahead.
Yeah, so I think for me, the key thing that I've seen is obviously that pivot to digital. I mean, everybody is talking about it. And I have a lot of friends who are, for example, yoga teachers or art teachers who kind of like, how can I possibly, you know, be a digital art teacher? And actually, by using things like Zoom and signing people up, in fact, from all over the world, we did have little virtual art classes and we enjoyed it. You're still talking to other people, checking in with each other. And in fact, to some degree, it broadened her customer base because she could have somebody from the UK doing an art class that was being held in Hong Kong. And it's the same with my yoga teacher. She just did Zoom classes. What I'm seeing is, as soon as things go back to normal and people can go back to studio, for example, is they're not doing the digital stuff anymore at all. And I've actually asked them, partly for my own purposes, but also as a kind of ongoing business suggestion, think about keeping some of that stream, you know? So think about what's worked well while we've been in this crazy situation. What should you keep? What should you discard? But don't just switch the digital bit off, you know? And I think also thinking about revenue models. So especially for entrepreneurs, for small businesses, so cash dependent. And that's been the hardest thing, I think, for a lot of people. I mean, the majority of businesses, both in the UK and the US, have only 1 month's cash at hand if they're lucky. And that's not much of a buffer. It doesn't take a lot to knock you off your socks, you know, if anything happens. So I think coming up with recurring revenue models, subscription-based models, pay in advance, deliver later, there's all kinds of different things that people could be doing. And I think to Kat's earlier point about supporting each other, I think that's where we, you know, as women, but as business people, can also really help each other out. Sometimes it's just little things like a reference or a referral, but do whatever we can possibly do to support each other through this, even if money is tight.
And one of the cool things that we're talking about is the way that even the nail technicians are saying, okay, you can buy one, you have one session of nails done.
Package deals.
They have a package deal of 10 and we're going to reduce the rate.
Pay for it now, use it later. The other thing, I mean, again, Kat was talking about innovation, creativity. I mean, I work in intellectual property business, and that's one of the things I always find fascinating about humans is, you know, necessity is the mother of invention. And one of the things that people were doing in China is the nail technicians were coming to the door with a little plastic stool in their basket. People would put their fingers through the what do you call it? I'm having an absolute mind melt. Letterbox, thank you, letterbox. Stick their hands through the letterbox, get the nails done. So I mean, it's socially distanced, medically safe, you know, manicures. And that's the kind of thing that actually does give me joy, because I think humans, no matter what happens, no matter what we go through, we will always figure out a way around and we'll come back stronger. And as Mary said, you know, that's all still there.
On that note, Karen Taylor, thank you so much for coming and sharing your amazing insights with us on the She Means Business Scotland show. I'm afraid that's it for today. Kat Lever says, absolutely, human spirit is absolutely remarkable. So let me just remind you that next week's show, we're going to be talking about how to create engaging content on Facebook, like how to define your audience, best practices for page posts, creating a content calendar, amplifying your posts, and the power of page insights. Also, we've got other news. We've got a whole bunch of events happening next week. For example, on Wednesday, in collaboration with the Edinburgh Chamber of Commerce, I'm doing a full day training on building a sales funnel on Instagram. That's on the 27th of May. On the 5th of June, we've got advanced Facebook strategies to increase your sales. That's going on again with the Edinburgh Chamber of Commerce online on a Zoom as well. On May the 28th, again next week at 4 o'clock, we've got founder failures, where you're going to be able to join a couple of people, including myself, talking about all the mistakes that we made when we were setting up our business so that you don't have to. And then finally, we've got the Edinburgh Small Business Meetup happening on Friday the 29th. That's Friday next week at 10 a.m. I'll put all the information for all of those events into the group as well. So it just leaves me to thank my guests, Kat Lever, Director of Brand Scotland, so very much, Mary Turner Thomson, author of The Bigamist and international bestseller, and Karen Taylor, General Manager of the Asia Pacific version of Anaqua IP Consultancy. So thank you very much for joining us today. Do continue to support the She Means Business Scotland by sharing this content and making sure everybody comes for the last version of the season 1 show next week, and we'll let you know when we reconvene for season 2. So thank you very much, and I'll see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.